cacophony of battle cuts through the deathly silence in an invitation to madness.
Amy, her AA is minus 10 on block, but has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted. Her AAA is minus 12 on block, but becomes safe when she has Red Rose Perception. You can also beat the last hit of her AAA with an auto GI for horizontal mid attacks. And if you don't have access to an auto GI, you can also use a normal GI. The same way as her normal AAA, you can beat the third hit of her Red Rose Perception AAA with an auto GI for horizontal mid attacks. And of course here as well, you can use a normal GI to beat the third hit. Her AB is minus 12 on block. You can always stack after the initial A, there is no mix up here, you just got to be fast. Amy, her AK is minus 12 on block. It is also possible to duck the second hit for a way bigger punish. Or you can also beat the second hit with an auto GI for a horizontal high kick. And since you can use auto GIs, you can also use a normal GI to beat the second hit. Amy, her 6A is minus 12 on block, but has follow-ups which cannot be interrupted. You can duck the third hit of Amy, her 6AA, but this will lose to her 6AK. You can also use an auto GI for horizontal high attacks to beat the third hit, but this might not only lose to her 6AK, but also her 6AB and 6AB hold. You can also GI the third hit, which will also beat her 6AK, but will definitely lose to her 6AB and 6AB hold. Amy can transition into Amaryllis Spin after 6AA. In order to deal with Amaryllis Spin attacks, you can sidestep and then guard. I will show you what this will look like against all moves only this time to not make this video any longer than it has to be. Also keep in mind that Amy can cancel Amaryllis Spin into her high parry, mid parry and low parry, which will then realign her with you and start an entirely new mix-up. You can duck the second hit of her 6A hold. There is no mix-up here since her 6A jails. Or you can use an auto GI for horizontal high attacks to beat the second hit as well. And of course a normal GI will work here too. Just like her 6AA, her 6A hold can transition into Amaryllis Spin and you can deal with it in the same way. Sidestep, then guard. Amy, her 6AB can be sidestepped to either side, but this will lose to her 6AA. The same as her 6AB, her 6AB hold can also be sidestepped to either side, but will also lose to her 6AA. Her 6AK is another follow-up of her 6A, which can be sidestepped to either side, but loses to 6AA. You can also beat the second hit of her 6AK with an auto GI for vertical mid kicks, but this might lose to her 6AA, 6AB and 6AB hold. Or you can use a normal GI to beat both 6AK and 6AA at the same time, but lose to 6AB and 6AB hold. Amy, her 1A is minus 16 on block and can transition into her low parry, but as long as you don't use a low attack to attempt a punish, you don't have to worry about it. You can also attempt to low throw after blocking 1A, but this will not work if she transitions into her low parry because it cancels the crouch. After blocking 1A hold, you can interrupt all options with an up to I-26 mid or high attack, but it's safer to punish with an I-16 as this will block punish her 1A as well. Amy, her 4A is minus 20 on block and gains a follow-up with Red Rose Perception, but you don't have to worry about it because it jails. Her Red Rose Perception for AA is -16 on block and leaves you in crouch. Also be aware that this gains a follow-up in Soul Charge. Amy her 4-6A is -12 on block. After blocking for crouch 3A, you can attempt to low throw her with Shangwa, but it has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted. Her full crouch 3AA is -12 on block but returns to crouching, so you need to punish with a mid or low. And because it returns to crouching, you can attempt to low throw her with Shangwa, Cassandra, Asta and Nightmare. It is also possible to beat the second hit with a GI. You can duck the second hit of Amy her BA. There is no mix-up here because her BB jails. Or you can use an auto GI for horizontal high attacks. And although there is very little reason to do so, you can also GI the second hit. Amy her BBB is -10 on block but has a follow-up which can't be interrupted, or she can transition into one of her parries and beat your I-10. You can duck the third hit of her BBB, but since she can transition into her parries, your punish should be I-18 or faster. With White Rose Perception, your punish should be I-16 or faster to guarantee not being parried. It is also possible to GI the third hit. You will be able to sidestep the last hit of Amy her BBB to the left side with most characters. Or you can use an auto GI for vertical mid attacks to beat the last hit, but this might lose to her BBB into parry options. Or you can beat the last hit with a normal GI, but this will lose to her BBB into parry options. Amy her B2 is -14 on block. Her 6BB is -10 on block, but has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted and can also transition into Amaryllis Spin, which will beat high attacks. Amy her 6BBB is -14 on block. Most characters will also be able to sidestep to the right side to beat the last hit. You can also use an auto GI for vertical mid attacks to beat the last hit, but this might lose to her Amaryllis Spin options should she transition into it after 6BB. And of course you can also use a normal GI to beat the last hit, but this will lose to Amaryllis Spin options after 6BB. To beat all Amaryllis Spin attacks after 6BB, you can sidestep then guard, preferably to your right side, as this will also beat her 6BBB string. Amy her 3B is -14 on block, but has a follow-up which can only be beaten by jump attacks. Amy her 3BA is actually safe on block, so you'll have to use a jump attack to beat the second hit. But if you have access to one, you can also use an auto GI for horizontal low attacks to beat the second hit. Although being your worst option once more, you can also use a normal GI to beat the second hit. Amy her 1B is -18 on block but returns to crouching, so you'll have to punish her with a mid or low. Amy her Red Rose Perception for BB is -10 on block. You can duck the second hit of Amy her 666BA, but be aware that she can also cancel 666B into any of her parries. It is also possible to beat the second hit with a normal GI, but this will lose to her 666BB, 666BB hold, and Red Rose Perception 666BA. Her Red Rose Perception 666BA is the same as the one without roses, just that the second hit will turn into a break attack, but you'll still be able to duck it. Amy her 666BB is minus 14 on block. You can also duck the second hit for a more damaging punish, but remember that Amy can cancel her 666B into any of her parries. You can also sidestep the second hit to either side, but this will lose to her 666BA and Red Rose Perception 666BA. Or you can interrupt the second hit with an I-10 attack, but this also will lose to her 666BA or Red Rose Perception 666BA. Amy her 666BB hold is minus 12 on block. You can also sidestep the second hit of this string to either side, but it will lose to 666BA and Red Rose Perception 666BA. And you can also interrupt it with an I-10 attack, but also lose to 666BA and Red Rose Perception 666BA. You can beat all of Amy her parry options after her 666B with an up to I-14 attack, but this will not work if Amy has White Rose Perception. Amy her White Rose Perception 214B is minus 20 on block, but be aware that it gains a follow-up in Soul Charge. Her full crouch 3B is minus 10 on block, but has a little bit of pushback. Her full crouch 1B is minus 16 on block. It can also transition into Amaryllis Spin, and you can interrupt all follow-ups with an I-18, but you should use an I-16 to also punish it if she doesn't transition. Amy her Wild Rising BB is minus 12 on block. But you can also duck the second hit for a more damaging punish. Amy her 6K is minus 12 on block, but it can transition into Amaryllis Spin and then she can parry your I-12. You can deal with all her Amaryllis Spin attacks after 6K6 with Sidestep Guard. Just like most, also Amy her 2K, full crouch K and backturn 2K are minus 14 on block. They will also return her to crouch, which means you can attempt to low throw her after blocking it. Her 1K is minus 12 on block and also returns to crouch, so you need to punish with a mid or low. And yet again, you can attempt to low for her because she returns to a crouching position. Amy, her 4K is minus 12 on block, but has a follow-up which can't be interrupted and is safe on block. You can beat the second hit of Amy, her 4KK with a normal GI. Amy, her full crouch 3K is minus 12 on block. Her Wild Rising K is minus 16 on block, but has a follow-up which can only be interrupted by tech crouching moves. You can duck the second hit of her Wild Rising KA or use a tech crouching move such as Tira, her 6K, to beat it. You also got the possibility of using an auto GI for horizontal high attacks to beat the second hit. And again, because auto GIs will work here, so will normal GIs. Amy, her 2A plus B is minus 14 on block and will leave her in a crouching position, so you'll have to punish her with a mid or low. And because she'll be left in a crouching position, you can attempt to low throw her after blocking it. Her 4A plus B is minus 16 on block, but has a follow-up which needs to be interrupted by jump attacks, but can also transition into Amaryllis Spin. Her 4A plus BA is minus 12 on block. And like I mentioned, you can beat the second hit with a jump attack, but this might lose to her 4A plus B6 Amaryllis Spin options if your jump attack isn't I-20 or faster. You can also use a normal GI to beat the last hit, but this will definitely lose to her 4A plus B6 options. In order to beat all of Amy's 4A plus B6 options and 4A plus BA at the same time, you need to interrupt everything with an I-20 or faster mid-jump attack. Amy, her 8A plus B will leave her at minus 14 on block. Amy, her 6B plus K is minus 14 on block, but becomes safer the further away you are when blocking it. Her 6B plus K hold is minus 12 on block and also becomes safer the further away you are when blocking it. To deal with all her Amaryllis Spin attacks after her back turn B plus K, sidestep and then guard. Amy, her 6-6A is minus 12 on block, but she can transition into any of her parries, which then might beat your I-12 punish. If you expect her to transition into one of her parries after 6-6A, you can beat all her parries with attacks between 16 and 22 frames. But this will not work if Amy has White Rose Perception. Amy, her 4-4A is minus 12 on block and has a follow-up, but you don't have to worry about it because it jails. 4-4AB is also minus 12 on block but has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted, and she can also transition into any of her parries but will only be able to parry your I-12 punish with White Rose Perception. You can duck the last hit of her 4-4ABA, just be aware that she can transition into any of her parries after 4-4AB. You can also beat the last hit of her 4-4ABA with an auto GI for horizontal high attacks, but this might lose to her parry options after 4-4AB. Or you can beat the last hit with a normal GI, but this will definitely lose to her parry options. You can beat all her parries after 4-4AB with an up to I-14 attack. This will however lose to her 4-4ABA and does not work when Amy has White Rose Perception. You can sidestep the second hit of Amy's White Rose Perception 4-4BB to either side. You can also interrupt the second hit with an I-12 attack, just make sure that you have enough range. And you also got the option to use an auto GI for vertical mid attacks to beat the second hit. And although you got better options, you can of course also use a normal GI to beat the second hit. Amy, her White Rose Perception 4-4BBB is minus 14 on block. And you can also beat the last hit with an auto GI for vertical mid attacks. Or, as always, a normal GI will work as well. Amy, her 2-2KB is minus 10 on block, but no character will be able to reach her unless there is a wall or ring edge behind her. Amy, her 6-6A plus B is minus 10 on block as well. Amy, her 6-6B plus K is minus 16 on block, but you'll need a punish with quite a bit of range. Her 6-6B plus K can also transition into Amaryllis Spin, but you can interrupt all options with an up to I-20 attack. You can interrupt all Amaryllis Spin options after 2-2B plus K with an I-12 attack. With White Rose Perception, your attack should be I-10 or faster, but since Amaryllis Spin tech crouches, this might be a problem. So instead of interrupting the follow-up, it is better to sidestep and then guard. Amy, her 2-2B plus K GK is minus 12 on block. And just like most running Ks, Amy's also is minus 22 on block. Amy, her Amaryllis Spin A is minus 12 on block and will leave her back turned. Her Amaryllis Spin B is minus 12 on block, but it has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted. Her Amaryllis Spin BB is minus 14 on block and only has another follow-up if Amy has Red Rose Perception. It is also possible to beat the second hit with a normal GI, but this will lose to her Amaryllis Spin B hold options. Her Red Rose Perception Amaryllis Spin BBB is minus 12 on block and will leave you in crouch. Most characters will also be able to sidestep the last hit to either side. Or you can use an auto GI for vertical mid attacks to beat the last hit. And of course this means that you can use normal GIs as well. You can beat all options after her Amaryllis Spin B hold with an I-16 mid attack. This will however lose to her Amaryllis Spin BB. Amy, her Amaryllis Spin 2 BGK is minus 12 on block. Her Amaryllis Spin K is minus 12 on block, but has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted and is also safe on block. Her Amaryllis Spin KB is minus 18 on block, but be aware that it gains a follow-up with White Rose Perception. You can beat the last hit of her White Rose Perception Amaryllis Spin KBB with an auto GI for vertical mid attacks. And if you don't have an auto GI, a normal GI will work as well. Amy, her Lilith Parry A, also referred to as mid parry, is minus 12 on block, but has a follow-up which cannot be interrupted. Her mid parry AA is minus 14 on block. You can also beat the second hit with an auto GI for horizontal mid attacks, but this might lose to her mid parry AB. Or you can use a normal GI to beat the second hit, but this will definitely lose to her mid parry AB. You can beat her follow-ups after mid parry A hold with an I-14 or I-16 mid or low, but this will not work with White Rose Perception. You can sidestep the second hit of her mid parry AB to either side, but this will lose to her mid parry AA. Or you can interrupt the second hit with an up to I-18 attack, but this also will lose to her mid parry AA, unless you have a fitting 18 frame auto GI. You can GI the second hit of her mid parry AK, which will also beat her mid parry AA, but lose to her mid parry AB. Amy, her mid parry BB is minus 12 on block and only has a follow-up with White Rose Perception. Her White Rose Perception mid parry BBB can be sidestepped to either side. And you can also interrupt it with an up to I-14 attack. You should use the I-12 to also block punish her mid parry BB. You can beat all options after her B hold with an I-14 mid attack. This will however lose to her mid parry BB and BK. You can duck the second hit of Amy, her mid parry BK, but this will lose to her mid parry BB. Her mid parry K is minus 12 on block. Her Merrow parry K, also referred to as low parry, is minus 18 on block, but at tip range it is only minus 14. It also returns her to crouching, which means that you can attempt to low throw her after blocking it. No matter which critical edge Amy uses, all of them are -20 on block. You can RI the last hit of Amy her Soul Charge Red Rose Perception AAA without risk, as the last hit will always come out. Amy her Soul Charge Red Rose Perception for AAA is -12 on block. And after blocking the first 2 hits, you can duck the last 2 hits. The last hit of Amy her Soul Charge 6BBBB can be sidestepped to either side. Her Soul Charge White Rose Perception for 1BB is -14 on block. Or for a more damaging punish, you can also sidestep the last hit to either side. And it is also possible to beat the last hit with an auto GI for vertical mid attacks. And although I wouldn't recommend it, you can also use a normal GI to beat the last hit. The best way to deal with all Amaryllis Spin attacks after 4/4B plus K6 is to sidestep, then guard. And Amy her Soul Charge Amaryllis Spin KAB is -22 on block.